Hi, this is Jim O'Neill. I'm Head of Global Economics Research at Goldman Sachs, and I'm going to talk to you about the world and the BRICS dream. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India and China, and is an acronym I dreamt up in 2001, soon after I took over running the economics department. The motives for me to do so were primarily twofold. First, in taking over the leadership of the department, I thought we needed to focus on how the world may change as well as how it was doing. And secondly, this came right after the tragic events of 9/11, which demonstrated clearly to us all that there was something wrong with the world. Soon after, I wrote an article entitled "The World Needs Better Economic BRICs," and in this article I showed that before the decade was over, the economies of Brazil, Russia, India and China would become much bigger shares of the global economy. 2 years later, we published a piece which tried to guess how the world may look by 2050. We showed that before 2050, China could overtake the United States to become the world's largest economy, possibly reaching as big as $45 trillion, 20 times bigger than it is today. We also showed that India could grow as large as $26 trillion, 50 times bigger than it was today. And also Brazil and Russia, their potential growth would be so big that they would become each members of the largest economies in the world, and that collectively the four BRICS economies could become bigger than the aggregate size of the G7. Many people think that this is just a dream and may or may not happen, and that the focus on the issue of the BRICS is overstated. It is very important to realise that already the BRICS economies are having a huge influence on the world economy. And we calculate that over the past 5 years, more than a quarter of world growth in US dollar terms has actually come from the BRICS economies. Even though the BRICS dream suggests that the absolute size of these countries could become as large as I've explained, it is important to remember that in terms of wealth, which we would measure as GDP per capita, the BRICS economies collectively will not become as wealthy as those of the G7. The United States in particular is still likely to be a lot wealthier than any of the BRICS economies, and Japan and many of the larger economies today will also be wealthier than most. Of the BRICS economies, and it's somewhat ironic because of their likely declining population, Russia is the one BRICS economy that might see its wealth become as large or as high as that of many of the developed economies today and in the future. If you map out the consequences for the world economy, it seems as though the next decade is likely to be the peak period for global GDP growth because of the BRICS phenomena. Thereafter, it is likely that growth may slow again as ageing in the older economies, especially in Europe and Japan, combines with the beginning of the ageing process in some of the BRICS economies, notable China. The potential for the growth of the middle classes in the BRICS economies is spectacular, and as soon as the next decade, the numbers of people entering the middle classes, which I would broadly define as those with income over $3,000 per head, could grow by fourfold. To use autos or cars as one example, it seems highly likely that the BRICS economies are going to be the major consumers of new cars, and you can easily see that in the next 20 years, China could actually be buying more cars than the United States, and that Brazil, Russia and India could each be buying more cars than any other of the G7 countries. Another topical area the BRICS countries seems to be having a big influence relates to commodities and in particular energy. If you apply our BRICS projections to commodity markets and energy, you will see it concludes that over the next decade or so, on average, world energy demand will rise by around 2.5% per year, which compares to around 1.5% for the past 20 years. Without huge and permanent investments to try and boost supply, this suggests that energy prices and other commodity prices are likely to remain very strong over the next decade. If all of this comes true in terms of the BRICS potential growth, it means that the importance of the BRICS economies in global capital markets is also going to rise dramatically. Even if these countries keep a very similar set of financial markets as they have today, their share of global markets in terms of equities and bonds will still grow dramatically. If they choose to adopt similar systems to those that we have in the West, then the growth will be nothing short of spectacular. And these will offer fantastic opportunities for investors all over the world. It is not just the capital markets that could be exciting. The potential for the exchange rates of the BRICS economies is also pretty spectacular. If you look at the lessons of other economies that historically have shown the enormous potential we have suggested for the BRICS economies, many of those saw their exchange rates rise sharply too. In conclusion, it seems to me it is no surprise that the BRICS phenomena is attracting so much attention amongst investors and the general public at large. Over the next 45 years, it is possible, if BRICS countries pursue good economic policies, that their economies collectively could become the biggest in the world. If that's true, it will have enormous influence on every aspect of our societies, and it will provide for those that have invested in the BRICS dream almost definitely pretty spectacular returns.